T01 Innovation the Amazon Way How to Build Innovation into the DNA of Your Company を開演いたします。講師は Amazon Web Services Head of Worldwide Developer Marketing Adam Fitzgerald です。Please welcome Adam Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon. I'm responsible for developer marketing for AWS, and this is my first time in Japan, so I'm enjoying it very much. Thank you for your hospitality, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about innovation and how to place innovation as a core part of your company. I was very pleased this morning when I saw Werner speaking about Airbnb. This is a company that has grown with tremendous speed on top of the AWS platform and delivered a truly innovative business solution to a traditional market. The thing I want to point out about Airbnb is that they've decided that innovation is a critical part of their business. So much so that in a blog post last year, Brian Chesky, their founder, made this statement. He said that culture is what forms the foundation of all future innovation. If you break the culture of your company, you break the machine that creates your products. This is a very interesting take on what innovation means to organizations. And at a company like Amazon, and in particular in the AWS group, we've found that culture is an incredibly important part of defining how new products come to light and how we conduct business. But I think there's more than just culture that goes into creating truly innovative technologies. It's an important part, but it's not the only part. So I'm going to speak to you today about the culture at Amazon that leads to innovation, that leads parts to that culture. There's been a lot already written and spoken about the uniqueness of the Amazon culture, and we'll touch on a few of those items. But I also want to talk about a couple of other topics that I think influence innovation within organizations and influence innovative creation of products very directly. This includes organization, so how do you group teams of developers together to produce products, as well as other teams within your group? How do you define an architecture that fosters innovation? This is a technical architecture, as well as the deployment architecture to support the release of those products. And how do you build supporting business mechanisms that reinforce the focus on innovation? I'll give you examples from inside AWS for all of these points, and that'll be my focus. I'm not making these recommendations that this is something you have to do for your own business. This is just the way that AWS has been successful at being an innovative company. And I think it'd be pretty hard to argue that AWS has not had an incredible rate of innovation. If you look at the path of releases that come from AWS, from the early days of just EC2 and S3, all the way through to the most recent releases, like the announcement last week of Zocalo and the mobile SDKs, the rate at which new services and new service features has been released by AWS has been accelerating. And this acceleration, this amazing delivery of technology and product to developers like yourselves has been a result of a strategic decision within the organization to focus on this type of activity. This is a direct consequence of the way that Amazon and AWS is focused on innovation. So let's start with that Amazon culture. Now, this is something you may have heard about previously, and I know it's been talked about by Werner this morning and by others over time, but there is a serious sense of customer obsession at Amazon and at AWS. Customers like yourselves are the ones that drive what it is we create. Being obsessed by what the customer is interested in and what the customer needs allows you to focus on delivering a solution that will have a place in the market, that will actually find users for it. It won't be something that's released without any attention paid to it. So we have a technique called working backwards from the customer. It starts by, before any development, before any proof of concepts, before any actual technology work is done, it starts with writing a simple document that is a press release stating what problem it is we're trying to solve from the customer's perspective. This press release forms the foundation for saying, this is the area in which I'm trying to make an investment, and this is what customers care about in this area. By writing the press release first, you think about things from the customer or end user perspective, and not from how it fits into your platform or what the convenience of it is or what the market opportunity of it is. You think about what the use case is, what the customer wants. From the press release, you then write a collection of frequently asked questions. These can be both internal questions and external questions, but the goal for the frequently asked questions is to refine the information that has been laid out in the press release. And then from the frequently asked questions, you create the user manual. This user manual can contain things like user documentation, user guides, interaction diagrams. This is the start of where you start to think about things that you might have seen in traditional software development. These define the criteria which you expect to create. You still haven't written a line of code yet. You're still thinking about this from the user perspective. You're still thinking about this from what does the user want out of the service or product that I'm creating. Only once you get to this step does this start to define the requirements for the product you're responsible for building. So once you get to the user manual phase, you're now finally stating, these are the features that need to exist. These are the things that are the minimum set of properties that need to be created for my product. This is where we start to define the MVP, the minimum viable product for this service. And that is the start of software development. So the culture at Amazon and at AWS, the customer obsession, drives this process. And it drives the next process as well, which is how we think about the products that we're going to create. So there's a requirement at AWS that every product or service be a loosely coupled product that has a hardened API with solid documentation. This documentation frequently comes out of the previous step, the user manual that we've just discussed. And this documentation is the contract for saying how to use this service. In fact, the API is itself the literal contract for how to use the service. The importance of having an API is critical to innovation because by stating clearly this is the contract for which I provide you service, it gives you the flexibility to change engineering-wise inside the service what you need to change to increase operational effectiveness or to migrate to new systems. But the contract is with the end user, it's with the customer, it's with the person that's using your technology. And that contract then becomes what you need to fulfill from a product perspective. Being an API, it means that you're leaving the flexibility of using that service open to the interpretation of the customer, the end user. An API-driven approach to development means that there's no way we could possibly know all the things our customer base is going to want to use this service for. So let's give them the tools to create the things that they are interested in using this service for. So this is the unit of production. This is the start of talking about how the architecture and the organization works within AWS. So let's talk a little bit about that organization. There's philosophy inside AWS and inside Amazon engineering in general that if your engineering team can't get fed at lunch on 2 pizzas, it needs more than 2 pizzas, then your engineering team is too big. So each service, each product is scoped to have a small team. This means that those team members are subject matter experts in that service. They are a self-contained autonomous unit for producing that service. And by focusing on the API contract for interaction with that service, they have a complete understanding of how that service can be used. This produces very, very small teams that are able to define a minimal viable product very quickly, iterate very quickly, and have great shared knowledge. There's not a requirement they constantly are updating, briefing other teams. The contract has already been stated. The API defines the contract for the service. The team itself is a small team doing agile development, and that's what we practice inside AWS. Once you get a couple of these teams, you've got to start thinking about making sure that they are autonomous from each other. You want each one to be working like a finely crafted Swiss watch, for example, or they make individual decisions between teams that might be different from one another, so their watch works differently from one another. But the idea is it shouldn't matter because they all have a contract with their users that's publicly defined, even if that user is another service team inside the organization. So, for example, if you think about a service like Zocalo, it clearly involves a lot of storage, it involves a lot of workflow management, it involves a lot of replication, it involves integration with the IAM services. But in each one of those situations, the Zocalo service interacts with those other services through the APIs available from those services. It's not differentiated, it's not using some backdoor to get into S3, it's not using some kind of secret, hidden AWS password to do things. It's an accumulation of services that already exist on the platform to produce a new service for our customers to use. That is the power of building loosely coupled autonomous units, loosely coupled products and services. It increases the rate at which new products, which combine existing products, can be created. And that's a critical part. As mentioned this morning, if you want to increase innovation, you have to lower the cost of failure. You have to reduce the consequences for getting something wrong. Part of the culture of Amazon defines that by looking at the customer first and making sure we're doing things the customer are interested in. But part of that is about making technical decisions to combine things together in new ways. There are some great basic building blocks on the AWS platform for creating new solutions, whether it's storage or networking or compute resources, or whether it's a high-level service, or whether it's a distribution service, or whether it's a productivity service. There's a whole collection of tools that are available on the AWS platform which you and anybody in the AWS engineering team can use to produce things. And because each software development group is an autonomous unit, if they determine to reorganize or redefine the services in their usage of other services inside their product, as long as they haven't changed the API contract, they can do so. They have the freedom to reassemble and recreate their solutions at will. This means that AWS is in the business of building the bricks for IT infrastructure and solutions. And from those bricks, we hope to create really great new structures, but we can't possibly create all the new structures that you can think of that will solve everybody's technology problems. That is the responsibility or the benefit of using the AWS platform. It gives you the raw building blocks for you to solve your own problem. So, innovation is about experimenting with these blocks, using them to solve the problems that you're interested in, and doing it in a way, from the AWS perspective, that allows them to be autonomous and self-controlled. So that's the organizational part of things. That's how team structures, that's how the engineering team structures work within AWS. But because we follow agile development methodologies, we also need to build an architecture that supports those development practices for those teams. The basic philosophy is to release early, release often. That's the agile way. It's also important to iterate very quickly. The speed of iteration, the speed at which you re-release your service is frequently more important than the quality of that individual iteration. If you make a mistake in a single iteration, you can roll back, move to the next iteration, and correct the mistake you've made. Whereas if you've got long periods between each iteration, you're stuck with that iteration of the product for a much longer time. So frequent releases is an incredibly important part of building the services that comprise AWS. And to support those frequent releases, you need continuous integration and continuous deployment capabilities. In particular, let's think about the integration part of this. If your new service, the new service that you're creating at AWS, is actually a composition of existing services at AWS that you interact with through APIs, then you need to make sure that you're constantly making every release that you make is in tune with the services that it is using, is integrated with the services that it is using. Now, those services are public contracts, APIs that say, this is how you should use this service. So it's well defined what that is. But you should be checking on every release, on every build for this integration. Additionally, your continuous deployment, every time you make a release, every time you push something out, and whether it's the release to staging or it's a release to a beta customers before you go to GA, whatever the release is, it needs to be repeatable and automated. There needs to be a process behind it. There should be no human intervention for a release besides pressing a button. Okay? We've actually got a very sophisticated deployment service that allows us to deploy across regions, across AZs, in very large scale at AWS. And this has been a critical part in allowing us to drive innovation and release new services and new features very, very quickly. Now, there's a lot of architecture that's involved in building continuous integration and continuous deployment, but those are the two things that enable your teams to meet the velocity that you want if you want them to innovate quickly. So there are critical investments for your company to make. I think, how many people here are using agile development approaches? Agile? Anybody? Okay, got a handful, okay? So I'm here to try to convince you that it's not just about innovation and speed when you use an agile development methodology. It's also got business value. If you are using frequent releases on short cycles, then you can recover from failure more quickly, you can recover from problems more quickly, you can iterate more quickly and make new improvements more quickly, and you also reduce the risk for every release. So you've minimized your business risk, and you've increased your ability to deliver new features. In a more traditional development technology, a more traditional development approach, rather, where there are infrequent releases in large, with large feature sets that are joined for each release, then if there is some kind of problem or integration problem or some kind of deployment problem or some kind of shipping problem, then you've actually increased your risk of some kind of problem happening because the complexity is higher, but also because you don't have the opportunity to fix that problem as quickly. So from a business perspective, not just from a software engineering perspective, but from a business perspective, it makes more sense to move towards a lean methodology than it does to traditional slow-release methodologies. So let me just describe some of the benefits of being on an agile development methodology that has been brought to the AWS and the Amazon.com platform. This is data from across Amazon.com, in fact. Since 2006, by moving to an agile release methodology, we've been able to reduce 75% of the outages triggered associated with software deployments. And that is actually, for each outage that has happened, this is for services on Amazon.com as well as AWS, for each outage that's happened, the amount of time that that outage has been in place, in market, has been reduced by 90%. So the number of minutes the outage consumes from the end user's perspective has been reduced even more dramatically. And now by releasing often and releasing frequently, and by building tools that automate this deployment and integration, it is now an incredibly rare event in the Amazon universe that a software release would produce some kind of service outage for itself or any other service. Less than 0.01%. So, the lean and agile development methodologies are great from an innovative perspective, but they've also got incredible business value to you as an organization. And when your business is delivered over the web, as AWS is, your availability, your access, your provision of services to customers, your availability, that is your key marker. If you're not available, you cannot possibly be driving value for your customers. So, I want to talk now about the business mechanisms. We've already transitioned, starting to talk about business value. Let's talk now about the business mechanisms that are associated with making sure that innovation is a critical part of your company. Inside AWS, we have every week a weekly business review on Wednesdays. And this is a meeting for all the senior leadership of the company and the leaders of every single AWS service. The S3 team, the EC2 team, the SNS team, the tools team, the transcoding team, the Zocalo team. Everybody is at this meeting. It's a big meeting, okay? And at this meeting, the service leaders are responsible for reporting on what's happening with their service. They report the same metrics every week. The number of customers that are using their service, the number of what the largest customers are for their service, what the trends are for their service usage, whether there's been any peaks in service usage, what the rate of feature requests are for their service, what the rate of feature usage is for their service. All of these things are incorporated in this report. This report is a couple of hundred pages, and it's produced every Wednesday. Now, you might be like, wow, that doesn't sound like a very agile business process. It's actually a very important part of building supporting mechanisms to drive innovation. You want to make sure your business processes reinforce the innovation that you want to produce in your engineering teams. And so, one of the responsibilities of the weekly business review is to think about the business processes that are themselves slowing down the rate at which the engineering teams can deliver products. The goal is to remove friction, business friction, from the engineering teams so they can get things out faster. So whether it's a pricing concern, or whether it's a billing problem, or whether it's the launch process itself, or synchronizing with the PR team, or synchronizing with the marketing team, the engineering team doesn't want to be held back by those kinds of concerns. They want to get their technology done, they want to get it tested, they want to get it in customers' hands, they want to get it out the door. So this is actually a copy of an actual WBR document. This is one of the pages from the report. And here, this is actually a report on the launch cadence. I had to blur out some of the lines to not give you a preview into what's coming. But the idea here is every service owner is aware of what the launch cadence is for the upcoming other services in the group. And importantly, this information is done in the launch process itself is an automated process. In the same way that we take repeatability and automation to be critical elements in continuous integration and continuous delivery, we take the same approach to the business processes these service teams are responsible for delivering. So the launch process itself, you'll launch, if you are a service owner and you've got a new feature request, you get classified as the importance of your launch, what the impact is for the end users, and then what the supporting resources are that need to happen. And that is all managed in a ticket system so that the marketing team updates the website at the same time, that with Jeff Barr gets enough notice ahead of time that he can write a really compelling blog post, that you can make sure that the documentation's in place, you can make sure that your technology, your service is rolled out to the appropriate regions, availability zones, and data centers that you'll be interested in interacting with. All these things are a part of that launch process. And the fact that it's repeatable and automated is an incredibly important part at being able to push innovative products out more quickly. So, automate your business processes to remove friction from your engineering teams. Another page from the document, the weekly business review, is this is actually the senior leadership team goals for the entire year. Every week, those goals are reviewed. Every week, those goals are assessed as to whether any changes need to be made to them. These goals are the things that set priority for the business. They determine when a decision needs to be made, what that decision needs to be. It's important, however, when you ruthlessly prioritize activity, that you also are not stubborn about it, that you're willing to reprioritize or change the focus that you may have about a release or a service or an activity. The priority setting is important. It's important to define which services need to be released, which services have the most resources allocated to them, and so on. But possibly the more important part is the willingness to reassign priority in the face of data that something needs to be different. Don't hold on to the horse as it's bolting away from you. So, the weekly business review gives the senior leadership team, the service teams, an opportunity to review the critical business metrics around the services, and allows the leadership team to think about, are we innovating fast enough? Are we getting to do things fast enough? You build business processes and business mechanisms to reduce and remove the friction that would stop innovation or halt innovation, and you set ruthless priorities in order to define what is the most important thing for you to be doing. That's all part of the culture of AWS team. And this leads me to my warning for you. If you are a small company, if you are in a small team, it's very, very easy to be innovative because you have very few dependencies, you know all the other people that you're interacting with, you can release very, very quickly, you don't have lots of external interactions with others. All the problems with slowdown in innovation happens as your organization grows. As the company gets bigger, as more and more people depend upon the services you provide, all of these things tend to produce a monolith, an aggregation of all your engineering efforts into one big ball of wool that is mixed together and all tied into one another and can't be teased apart. It takes a lot of business energy to focus your growing team to still be innovative. You have to fight every day against the slow aggregation of all of these things together. And it's important that these pieces, the philosophies we've talked about earlier today, so the autonomous, self-contained engineering teams, the two pizza teams that can continue to innovate and operate on their own and can have their own power of decision-making. It's important, those guys become more and more important the bigger your organization gets. Because those are the people that make it possible for you to maintain velocity in innovation. So, let me just recap about the 4 things I mentioned were the critical drivers for innovation. First, we agree with Airbnb that culture is incredibly important for defining whether you're an innovative business. And as I mentioned, Amazon's got a very unique culture, customer obsessed. We look for those kinds of traits in the people we recruit and hire. We look for people with innovative backgrounds. We look for people with customer obsession. We look for people with exceptional talent. That's part of the culture. But there are other pieces here. How you organize your teams, how you organize your engineering teams, how you organize the other parts of your business, organizing those teams into autonomous, self-contained units that have independence over decision-making and release capabilities. That's incredibly important as well for driving innovation. Choosing an architecture for your solution that increases innovation. So I think about architecture. I'm not just talking about the architecture of the products, the fact that they're API-driven and contract-focused with the customer in mind, but also the fact that your production architecture, your continuous integration, and your deployment solutions are automated and repeatable, so that the architecture that supports the engineering efforts that you have, that architecture is the thing that drives innovation as well, enables innovation. And then lastly, you've got to make sure that the business is not getting in the way of the type of innovation you want. You've got to make sure the business processes are streamlined, preferably automatable, repeatable, and you've got to make sure that the friction has been removed so the business is not impeding the velocity of the engineering teams. And you've got to ruthlessly set priorities about what resources you dedicate to what problems. And in order to do that, you need an incredible intelligence about how your product's being used. So those are the things that we've talked about so far today. Those are the lessons that come out from AWS. But I used to be a mathematician, so I'm not going to pretend all of those 4 things are equal to each other. Okay? What I would say instead is that the relationship of innovation within inside your company to those 4 principles is related differently. They're related like this. The organization, the way you organize your teams, and the architecture you build to support the delivery of the services those teams create is linearly related to the innovation you can produce. But the mechanisms you put in place around your business to support innovation and the culture you use to define the innovation within your company, those 2 things are exponentially related to your rate of innovation. You have to have a defined culture within the organization that prizes innovation, that says innovation is the right thing to be doing. If you improve your organizational structure by 20%, you'll get a 20% increase in a linear relationship, something like a 20% increase in the rate of innovation. But if you put a 20% increase into the improvement in the business mechanisms associated with innovation, you will see massive improvements in the rate of innovation within your organization, especially if you have the supporting architecture and team organization. So that's me just I want to be a little bit of a math geek about how these things are related to one another. If you're going to make an investment, it's the hardest investment to make, looking at your culture, but it's the one with the greatest long-term return. The one thing I want you to take away from this talk is that while there's lots of talk about innovation, innovation is not necessarily the goal. It is an ongoing process you have to bake into your business. It needs to become a core part of your business. Innovation, you don't suddenly go, oh, now we're innovative, we're done. You have to try to be innovative all the time, every day. And that is why things like the weekly business review for AWS have been so important. And this is reflected in statements from CEO and founder Jeff Bezos. Basically reinforces this by saying Amazon had really only 3 big ideas that have been working for 18 years. But those 3 ideas are the reason that Amazon is successful. Put the customer first, invent, and be patient. If you think about your customer, that defines the contract for the things you're trying to produce. If you are innovative, you will be able to respond to those customer needs more quickly than anybody else and be able to deliver greater value to them. And over the long haul, every customer will recognize the value you're providing and will be happy that you've provided that solution to them and will be more likely to be a return customer to your platform. This is a long game. AWS believes they're a great partner for any IT decision you make now or in the future. We're happy to receive customer feedback. We're happy to find out what the customers are interested in trying next. And we're happy to be producing great innovative solutions. But we're a long, long way from producing all the possible ideas out there in cloud computing, let alone other types of computing. So it's early days for cloud computing. Our customers, you guys in this audience, are our partners in helping define that future. And we find the customer interaction the biggest input we have for the innovation that we're trying to create. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for your attention. I want to thank Andy Jassy, Werner Vogels, Jeff Barr, and Peter Kemps. Those are the guys that wrote the slides that I stole and then put together into this presentation. Thank you very much for spending your time with me today. Enjoy the rest of your week here at the AWS Summit. Thank you.